A billionaire soldier returns home expecting a joyful reunion, but instead finds his blind mother begging on the streets, forcing him to uncover a shocking betrayal that destroyed her life. The moment the black luxury car stopped in the middle of the crowded street, everything changed. The door slowly opened, and polished shoes touched the dusty ground. People turned to look, whispering, admiring the powerful presence of the man who had just stepped out. He was no longer just a soldier, he was a billionaire now. Strong, successful, untouchable. But then, his eyes shifted across the street, and suddenly, his entire body froze. There, sitting on the broken sidewalk, was an old blind woman. Her clothes were torn. Her hands trembled as she stretched them forward, asking for help. Her eyes, empty and lifeless, stared into nothing. People walked past her without care. Some threw coins into her bowl without even looking at her face. And in that moment, something inside him broke. His breath got heavier. His heartbeat started racing. "No," he whispered under his breath. He took a slow step forward, then another, unable to believe what he was seeing. The woman slightly moved her head as a coin dropped into her bowl. She quietly said, "Thank you," her voice weak, tired, familiar. Too familiar. His hands started shaking. This can't be real. He moved closer, his eyes now filled with fear and denial. Her face, her voice, the way she held her hands. It was her. It was his mother. The same woman who once held his hand while crossing the street. The same woman who stayed hungry just to feed him. The same woman who prayed for his safety every single night. Now, sitting on the road blind, begging. A man passing by casually threw a coin into her bowl and walked away, as if her pain had no value. And that moment hit him harder than any war he had ever fought. How could this happen? How could the woman who gave him everything end up like this? His chest tightened. His eyes filled with tears, but he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even call her name. The world around him continued like nothing was wrong. Cars moving, people talking, life going on. But for him, time had stopped. Right there, in front of his own eyes, his success meant nothing. Because the one person he wanted to protect the most had been left alone in darkness. And he wasn't there. A single tear rolled down his face as he stood just a few steps away from her, watching silently, broken from within. Sometimes, the biggest success in life means nothing if you fail the one person who needed you the most. The sound of coins hitting the metal bowl echoed in his ears, and suddenly, the present faded away. Memories rushed in like a storm. He saw himself as a little boy again, barefoot, holding his mother's hand tightly as they walked through the same kind of crowded streets. But back then, her grip was strong, protective, full of life. She would smile at him, even when her own eyes carried silent pain. "Don't worry," she used to say softly, "as long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you." And she meant it. There were nights when she stayed awake, sewing clothes under a dim light, just to earn enough money for his school fees. Her fingers would bleed, her back would ache, but she never complained. He remembered how she would pretend she wasn't hungry, pushing the last piece of bread toward him. "I already ate," she would lie with a gentle smile. But he knew she hadn't. She gave me everything, and I couldn't even give her a peaceful life. The memories kept unfolding. Rainy nights when the roof leaked, and she would cover him with her own body to keep him dry. Cold mornings when she wrapped him in her shawl, while she shivered in silence. And yet, she always spoke of hope. "You will grow up to be someone strong," she would tell him, brushing his hair with care. "Someone who protects others." Those words stayed with him. That was the reason he chose the military. Not for fame, not for money, but to become the man she believed he could be. Every step he took, every battle he fought, was for her. He still remembered the day he left for training. She stood at the door, hiding her tears, her hands trembling slightly. "Go," she said, forcing a smile. "Make me proud." And he promised her he would come back. Stronger, better, worthy of her sacrifices. But standing there now, watching her broken, helpless, and blind, what did all those promises mean? What kind of son becomes successful, but loses the very person who made him strong? A tear slid down his face as the memories slowly faded, bringing him back to the painful reality. The same mother who once protected him from the world was now alone, unprotected, forgotten. And he wasn't there when she needed him the most. Sometimes, the greatest heroes in our lives are the ones the world never sees. Gunfire echoed through the cold night, and he ran straight into danger. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. Years ago, when he first stepped into the military camp, he was just a young man carrying his mother's dreams in his heart. The training was brutal. Days turned into sleepless nights, and every test pushed him beyond his limits. But every time he felt like giving up, he remembered her voice. "You are stronger than you think." And he proved it. Battle after battle, he stood firm. While others hesitated, he moved forward. While others broke down, he endured. His courage didn't go unnoticed. Slowly, his name began to rise, first among his unit, then across divisions. But the journey wasn't easy. He saw things no one should ever see. Lost friends. Broken promises. Moments where life and death stood just inches apart. Yet, he survived. Not for himself, but for her. "I have to go back. I have to give her the life she deserves." That thought became his strength. One mission changed everything. A high-risk operation, one that no one wanted to take. But he stepped forward, leading his team through chaos, making impossible decisions under pressure. He saved lives that night. And in doing so, he changed his own destiny. Awards followed. Recognition grew. Opportunities opened. After years of service, he stepped into a new world: business, investments, power. The discipline he learned in the army became his greatest weapon. He built an empire, one decision at a time. Money came. Respect came. Success followed him everywhere. But deep inside, one dream stayed untouched: to return home. To see his mother smiling, living peacefully, finally free from struggle. He imagined that moment countless times. Walking through the door, calling her name, seeing her proud eyes filled with joy. Wasn't that the reason behind every sacrifice he made? Every sleepless night, every drop of sweat, every risk he took. It was all for her. But standing there now, in front of a reality he never imagined, all that success felt empty. Because while he was busy winning battles in the world, he had unknowingly lost the most important one at home. Sometimes, in the pursuit of success, we forget the very reason we started. He couldn't stand there anymore. With trembling hands and a storm in his chest, he stepped closer, but instead of revealing himself, he quietly moved aside and began asking the nearby shopkeepers. At first, no one paid attention. "She's just a beggar," one man said casually. But he insisted. "There must be a story. What happened to her?" His voice was firm, but his eyes were desperate. An old shopkeeper finally looked at him carefully, and sighed. "Her story isn't simple," he said slowly. "It's painful." And with those words, the truth began to unfold. After her son left for the military, she was alone. At first, everything was fine. She waited for his calls, kept his room clean, and lived with hope in her heart. But slowly, people around her started changing. Relatives who once smiled at her began visiting more often, pretending to care, pretending to help. They said they were family, the old man continued, shaking his head. But they had other plans. They convinced her to sign some papers, telling her it was for protection, for safety. She trusted them. Why wouldn't she? They were her own blood. But those papers took everything away. Her house, her savings, her security, everything. How could they do this to her? She was thrown out of her own home, the man said quietly. Left with nothing. His fists clenched. His breath grew heavier. But the worst was yet to come. One night, as she tried to survive on the streets, weak, hungry, alone, an accident happened. A reckless vehicle. A sudden crash. No one stopped. No one helped. She lost her eyesight that night, the man said, his voice breaking slightly. And from that day on, darkness became her world. Silence filled the air. The soldier stood there, completely shattered. The woman who once guided him through life now couldn't even see the world around her. And where were those relatives? Gone. Living comfortably, with the life they stole from her. Enjoying the very roof that once belonged to her. Was this what trust leads to? Betrayal, pain, And destruction? His jaw tightened. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and grief. Every word he heard felt like a knife. He slowly turned his head, looking back at his mother, still sitting on the roadside, unaware that her son was standing just a few steps away. She had lost everything. Her home, her dignity, her sight, and the people who should have protected her became the reason for her downfall. A deep silence settled inside him, but beneath that silence, something powerful was rising. Not just pain, not just sadness, but a fire. A fire that would not stay quiet anymore. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are not given by strangers, but by the ones we trust the most. His legs felt weak, but somehow he walked toward her. Each step was heavier than the last, as if the weight of every memory, every regret, was pulling him down. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough to hear her breathing, close enough to see the pain written on her face. But he couldn't say a word. His lips trembled. His chest tightened. And then, the tears came. Silently. Uncontrollably. He turned his face slightly, trying to hide his emotions from the world, but inside, he was breaking apart. How could he stand in front of her, and not call her mother? How could he let her sit there, like a stranger? A man walked by and dropped a coin into her bowl again. The sound echoed, sharp and cruel. This time, he couldn't take it. He stepped forward quickly, his hands shaking, and gently pushed the bowl away. No, his voice cracked, barely audible. His mother flinched slightly, confused. Please don't, she said softly, thinking he was stopping her from begging. That voice. It shattered him all over again. He fell to his knees in front of her, his head lowered, his shoulders trembling. Tears dropped onto the dusty ground. But still, he didn't reveal himself. If I tell her now, she will only feel my pain, but I need to fix everything first. He slowly reached into his pocket and placed a bundle of money beside her, more than anyone had ever given her. But even that felt meaningless. Because what she needed wasn't money. It was dignity. It was justice. It was the life that was stolen from her. He stood up slowly, wiping his tears, but his eyes had changed now. The pain was still there. But behind that pain, something stronger had taken its place. A quiet storm. A controlled fire. He took one last look at her, memorizing every detail, every wound, every moment of her suffering. Not as a helpless son, but as someone who was about to change everything. Was this the end of her pain, or just the beginning of something bigger? Without saying another word, he turned around and walked away. But this time, he wasn't walking away in helplessness. He was walking away with a promise. A promise to bring back her lost dignity. A promise to destroy every person who caused her pain. A promise to make things right, no matter the cost. Sometimes, silence is not weakness, it is the moment before justice begins. The next morning, everything began to change. Not loudly, not publicly, but quietly, powerfully. Inside a sleek office, far away from the dusty streets where his mother still sat, he stood in silence, looking at a file placed in front of him. Names. Documents. Proof. Every single person who had betrayed her was now on that list. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something dangerous. They took everything from her. Now it's time I take everything from them. With one simple nod, the process began. Lawyers moved quickly. Investigators dug deep. Old records were uncovered. Hidden transactions were exposed. The lies that had once been buried slowly started rising to the surface. One by one, the truth came out. The relatives who once pretended to care were now standing in offices, being questioned. Their confidence began to crack. Their voices trembled as evidence was placed in front of them. You forced her to sign these papers, didn't you? Silence. You took her property, knowing she trusted you.
No answers.
Because there were none. Their world was starting to fall apart. Properties were frozen. Bank accounts were seized. Legal notices arrived at their doors like unstoppable storms. The same homes they had stolen were now being taken away from them. Fear replaced their comfort. Panic replaced their arrogance. Was this just revenge, or was it justice finally waking up? He didn't stop there. The man responsible for the accident, the one who left her on the road without help, was found. Security footage. Witness statements. Every detail uncovered. And this time, there was no escape. As the truth spread, people began to talk. Whispers turned into judgment. The respect those people once enjoyed disappeared overnight. They were no longer powerful. They were exposed. And through it all, he remained in the shadows. Watching. Controlling. Making sure every step was precise. This wasn't anger acting blindly. This was pain, guided by purpose. Days later, everything they had built on lies was gone. And for the first time, the balance began to return. Not because someone powerful wanted revenge, but because someone broken demanded justice. He stood by the window, looking out at the city, calm but not at peace yet. Because one final step remained. The step that mattered the most. Sometimes, justice doesn't come with noise. It comes with truth that no one can escape. That same street, that same broken sidewalk. But this time, he didn't stop from a distance. He walked straight toward her.
No hesitación.
No fear. Only love. She was sitting exactly where he had left her, her fragile hands resting in her lap, her empty eyes facing the world that had turned its back on her. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at her, taking in every detail, every scar life had left on her. And then, slowly, he knelt down in front of her. His hands trembled as he gently held hers. She flinched slightly, surprised by the sudden touch. Who is it?" she asked softly, her voice weak but calm. His throat tightened. Years of strength, of control, of silence. All broke in that one moment. "It's me," he whispered, his voice shaking. A pause. The world seemed to stop again. "My son," she said, almost in disbelief. Tears rolled down his face as he nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yes, mother. I'm here." For a second, she didn't move. As if her heart was trying to believe something her mind couldn't. Then suddenly, her hands tightened around his. She reached forward, touching his face, slowly, carefully, as if trying to recognize him through her fingers. And then, she broke down. "My son," she cried, her voice trembling with emotion. "You came back." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if he was afraid to lose her again. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry." She shook her head, crying against his chest. "You came back, that's enough for me." But he knew. It wasn't enough. Not after everything she had suffered. I will never let her feel this pain again. Never. That day, everything changed. She was taken away from the streets, not as a beggar, but as a mother who deserved respect. Doctors were arranged. Care was given. A beautiful home was prepared, warm, safe, filled with light, even if she could no longer see it. But this time, she could feel it. His presence. His love. His protection. Days turned into peace. Her life, once filled with darkness and pain, slowly transformed into comfort and dignity. And he stayed by her side. Not as a billionaire. Not as a hero. But as a son, who had finally come home. Because in the end, what truly matters? Not money. Not power. But the people who stood by you, when you had nothing. Sometimes, the greatest victory in life is simply bringing your loved ones back from pain to peace.